Hi everyone, this is Andrew Primer, a Ukrainian American, reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, week 149 of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this is the second week of January 2025. In today's podcast, Ukraine biggest attack on Russian energy production capacity in the beginning of 2025. Damages are huge, and we also cover Trump's clearly wants to meet Putin and make a deal. Here's what he has done in the last few weeks to strengthen its position. Ukraine biggest attack on the night of January 13. Ukraine launched a drone and missile attack on several industrial enterprises in the Russian Federation. The first information came about a drone and missile strike on city Bryansk chemical plant named after the 15th anniversary of formation of USSR. In the village of Silce, on the outskirts of the city of Bryansk. This is where the action took place. As can be seen in numerous posted videos online, there were multiple direct missile hits on the facility. I don't know about the drones, but the missiles hit the facility. The Ukrainian General Staff announced that there were direct hits on the plant and little was left of it. By the way, the plant produced explosive and several types of ammunition for rockets and barrel artillery. Multiple launch rocket systems and other military equipment were also repaired there. So that was a big hit for the aggressor. The strike was so painful for the Russian side that the Russian Defense Ministry singled out the strike separately in its daily briefing and promised to retaliate. That was the quote. The actions of the Kiev regime supported by the Western curators will not go unanswered. Well, they were especially upset that the strike was carried out using ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles. But there is no confirmation of that, and this is a Russian propaganda as usual. It was hard to say what missiles were used. It should be noted that usually the Russian Defense Ministry makes statements such as, "We will not forget, we will not forgive, we will take revenge," only when something really important has been blown up in Russia. In general, the Ukrainian military hit a very important object. Of course, they should be congratulated for this. But this was only the beginning of the rather long night for the Russians. After the same time, several strikes were launched at once at a strategic nuclear aviation airfield in the city of Engels. The strike fell, according to the Ukrainian General Staff, on an entire warehouse with bombs and missiles intended for aircraft based there. The warehouse with these bombs and missiles was waiting to be unloaded next to the Airbus arsenal, but just like that, it turned up, and now this warehouse is gone. It's turned into ashes. Several more strikes by Ukrainian drones fell on the unburned, unfinished, so to speak, remains of the local airfield fuel depot. They had already struck there a week ago, but then three fuel tanks burned down, six more were damaged. Now, Ukraine did another new strike. Again, a very powerful fire with a very powerful fire. Nothing remained undamaged at this fuel depot. It burned down to the ground. That is, the Russian planes at the main base of strategic bomber aviation were left, firstly, without weapons because the warehouse with bombs and missiles was blown up, and also without any fuel. At the same time, in Saratov city of the Russian Federation, right across the river, one of the oldest Russian oil refineries was also attacked. It's called the Saratov refinery. Its capacity is approximately 7 million tons of oil per year. The enterprise supplied the Volga region and, of course, the nearby military units. In Kazan city, Meanwhile, drones attacked some liquefied gas bases. As far as it was known, this is where methane, propane, butane, and similar gases are stored in a liquefied state. Explosions again, a huge fire again, everything as usual was on fire. The only interesting thing is that several more drones hit the Kazan Orzhenets plant, which manufactures various chemical products. Some poisonous abomination leaked there, and the authorities immediately announced that nothing had hit the plant. Although everyone had supposedly seen this before, videos were published on Telegram channels all over the place of how this plant was burning, and just a lot of drones flew there. But the authorities, in order not to sow any panic, declared that nothing had been hit at all. In the Tula region, in the Alexinsky chemical plant, Tulacherment and Alexinsky coal plant were also attacked during the night. In some areas of the city of Tula, electricity and heat were turned off. Apparently, the strikes were still where they should have been. Although, it must be admitted that in the Tula case, there are no videos of drones or missiles hitting the power plant or any other factories. There are videos where drones are shot down over the city with missiles, but at the same time, there are videos in which local people walk around, film those drones that are being shut down, and say that everything here is out of power. The electricity has been shut down. That is, the coal power plant has probably stopped producing electricity at least. By the way, I also want to note that drones are shut down with air defense missiles, which are actually very expensive. Most likely, the Russians use Pantsir complexes. They are very expensive. One such missile might cost of producing 100 drones. That is, even if a drone is shut down, it is still profitable for Ukraine, purely in terms of money. If it is shut down with such a missile, if it's shut down with a machine gun, then of course it's not profitable. Bullets, as you understand, are significantly cheaper than drones and the rockets. It should also be noted that drones also flew to some factories in the Oryol and Voronezh regions. There, however, we will not invent without details, so to speak. What happened there, we don't know. In general, we are confident that something happened on January 13 and Ukraine carried out the most massive, successful combined missile slash drone strike, probably in the entire war. According to the information from the Russian sources and the Ukrainian sources, the Ukrainian forces used 2,000 long range missiles and over 200 drones during the one night. So let's talk about how Trump has voiced a general desire to meet with dictator Putin. There is nothing sensational here. We must prepare that after the inauguration, because Trump is extravagant, he's he's to speak predictable in his unpredictability, and therefore we can expect any statements. And after his team's formation, we can expect any steps from the same Trump. Remember, even during his first term, Trump wanted to meet with Putin. Finally, he met in Finland, and then this meeting turned out, fortunately for Ukraine, to be a failure. Therefore, the task of our diplomacy and foreign policy is to do everything possible to best prepare Trump and his team before the meeting with Putin. For this, our president must meet with Trump much earlier than with dictator Putin. The same situation occurred in 2017, if you remember, when Donald Trump announced that he wanted to meet with President Putin, and we actively, as Ukrainians, worked to prevent this. And we knocked on all the doors then. Then we managed to organize one of Trump's first phone conversation with then president and also organize a visit by the president of Ukraine to Washington. And we were the first to meet with Trump. Thus, we gave him specific arguments as to why it's worth supporting Ukraine. Trump's presidency is a challenge, but also might be an opportunity. However, the fact that he is unpredictable is a big problem for Putin because he doesn't know what to expect from Donald Trump tomorrow. Secondly, today, according to several sources in Washington, there is a complete chaos in Trump's team at the moment. There is a struggle between several camps in Trump's team right now. Some supporters, led by Vice President J.D. Vance, advocate stopping strong support for Ukraine. This is not really in the interest of the United States, he says. The other part is trying to convince that Putin should be stopped in Ukraine and that supporting Ukraine is in the national interest of the United States. So, today, there is a complicated, powerful struggle. And of course, this is what caused Trump's statements, when sometimes one contradicts the other. On the other hand, he reminds us that he is ready to help Ukraine because he understands it. And on the other hand, as he stated on January 9th, one of his priorities is to meet with Putin. But on the other hand, we must also look at the statements of Keith Kellogg. He's Trump's candidate for the position of Special Representative for Ukraine. And he's trying with his statements on the one hand to reassure Western allies, and on the other hand to take into account the concerns of the Ukrainian side. And he's trying, so to speak, to conduct his diplomacy. The tactics and strategy of Trump's team regarding Ukraine are currently being determined. Unfortunately, I feel that the Ukrainian side currently lacks communication channels with Trump team. Unfortunately, currently the search for a solution to the war in Ukraine is being decided mainly in the media space and not at the negotiation table, albeit in confidential manner. And this cannot but worry us. We all saw that President Zelensky visited Italy, and if you remember, a few days earlier, Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, visited the Trump residence. She actually has excellent relations not only with Trump, but also with his team, in particular with Elon Musk. And I think that one of the key thesis and the request of the Ukrainian side to Melania was a request to help establish communication with Trump and his team to help restore fruitful contacts or establish fruitful connections with Elon Musk, who unfortunately is not exactly playing a constructive position today. But my explanation for this is straightforward. Trump is a very cunning, tough negotiator. First of all, he's a businessman and thinks in terms of agreements. And with such statements about Canada, Greenland, and Panama, he is trying to raise the stakes before possible negotiations. Because, and we went through this, Trump is known for his foreign policy strategy of the so called crazy game. In playing this game, he's counting on others to try to calm him down by making so called crazy concessions. What is this about? For example, when he attacks Canada, it's clear that he will demand and perhaps a compromise will be sound so that Canada, for example, lowers tariffs on American goods or establishes the most favored national regime for American businesses in the Canadian market. As for Greenland, perhaps he wants this way to strengthen the presence of the American side in Greenland and at the same time take control of the adjacent territories, in particular Antarctica, because this is currently being fought over. Antarctica is also sea routes, delivery of goods, business, and so on. Therefore, I am still convinced that in the end, some compromise will be found and this situation will be settled, and finally, the Ukrainian issue will become a priority again. Traditionally, leaders of countries were not invited to the inauguration of a US president. Traditionally, highly pledged ambassadors accredited in Washington participated and represented the countries. But, Trump decided to act non-linearly and he has already officially invited many world leaders. The same Prime Minister of Italy, Melania, the head of China. As for President of Ukraine, as far we see, there is no invitation yet. But here we have problems with the Ukrainian ambassador, which is very difficult. It got to the point that just a few days ago, the newspaper Washington Post published an editorial piece and was entirely devoted to the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States with the key message that Ukraine should change its ambassador if it wants to build constructive and fruitful relations with the Republican camp in the United States. So today, it is difficult for me to say whether there is an invitation for the president of Ukraine or whether he will go there. But if I were the ambassador, I think that a long time ago we would have had an invitation and our president would have been preparing for a visit to the United States. Unfortunately, Ukraine doesn't have any direct contacts with the Trump team, and this is bad. The contact group meeting in the Ramstein format took place the day before. What we all noticed and what was significant. It was truly shocking to see the statements made by President Zelensky at this meeting. In particular, he stated, and I quote, "I'm doing everything possible that in 2025 the war ends with dignity for Ukraine in Europe." And this is something new. We started, as you remember, with our position being the return of Ukraine to the borders of 1991. Then the position evolved, and there was the return of Ukraine to the borders of 2022. We only had victory, and then the president put forward, remember, all the plans for victory. Then, just a few weeks ago, the president changed his strategy and said that Ukraine is interested in the so called just peace. And he talked a lot about this. And already at this meeting at Ramstein last week, he declared a dignified end to the war. This evolution cannot but raise a specific question, because then we need to explain what actually that is. When we talk about the borders of 1991, it's clear. 2022 is clear. But what it means by a dignified end of the war? We don't even say a just peace. We're not talking about the victory, but about some dignified end to the war. This is a little disturbing. Disturbing for us, disturbing to the population, disturbing to our allies. Perhaps this is already being prepared as a position for the Trump administration, but we would like to receive some clarification from the Ukrainian side about such a sharp evolution of Ukraine's position. What we can say, let's hope for the better. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, please share with your friends.